From the world's most volatile region, conflicts over faith and boundaries. Stories of death, destruction, despair, and hope. WION brings you to the heart of the action. Incisive analysis, unrivaled perspective, and exclusive ground reports. Watch West Asia Post every Friday, 8:30 p.m. IST with me, Radi Francis. Only on WION, World is One.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIOnews.com. World is One.
The stress of our world can take a toll.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Priyanka Sharma. Here's what's coming up tonight on the show.
The toll of the virus is of concern to the rest of the world.
It's December 2022. Look around you. What's happening? People are without masks. Without any fear, they're shopping for the holidays. Planning to see their families overseas. The Christmas spirit is in the air. Airports are trying to keep up with the high travel demand. And now, look at China. Just look at the scenes at this funeral home. These are people who have died from the Wuhan virus. Elsewhere, people are queuing up for essentials. They are hoarding medicines. Ibuprofen is sold out. The Chinese are stocking up on lemons for vitamin C to boost their immunity. And Chinese officials are downplaying the threat of the virus. Sound familiar? It's a scene right out of December 2019. 3 years on, the same story is repeating itself. It's time for you to pay close attention. On Gravitas tonight, I'll tell you why it's time to put your guard back on. Just when the world had learned to live with the virus and move on, China may be throwing us all into a new wave. Also on the show, from the Qatargate scandal rocking the European Parliament to the corruption within the UK Parliament. Today on the show, I'll tell you why Europe is battling a problem of institutionalized corruption. It's high time it stops lecturing the world about morality and accountability. And Twitter wants the chief twit out. Yes, the platform has voted for Elon Musk to leave Twitter. Will he listen to the voice of the people as he claims? We'll call his bluff. 2022 has seen a spate of climate summits. Global leaders have promised to save the world, big speeches, bigger funds, plenty of solidarity on display. And yet here we are. Tonight, we'll assess what have climate summits achieved this year. This will be our report card for the world to see, all coming up on the show. This may sound alarmist. Just when you thought that nightmare was over and the mask could be thrown away, alarm bells have been clanging again with a dreadful insistence. Scientists from the fringe to the mainstream are predicting that a new wave of the Wuhan virus could soon bring back the horrors of 2020 magnified. We don't know when, we don't know how, but we do know the origins. China. And we are being told the consequences now. I don't say this without reason. Over the last 3 days, a host of universities, researchers, scientists, even the US State Department, they've all warned that China's COVID surge could spill over to the rest of the world. So tonight on Gravitas, I'll take you through these warnings. We'll dissect the predictions and assess the risk of a potential horrific new wave. I'll start with a warning issued by this gentleman, Eric Feigelding. He's an American public health scientist who heads the COVID task force. At the New England Complex Systems Institute, this is a think tank in Cambridge, United States. In January 2020, he was one of the first health experts to sound an alarm over the Wuhan virus. He said that COVID-19 could be catastrophic. He called it thermonuclear pandemic level bad. Once again, these are his words. He was slammed for spreading hysteria, accused of crying wolf unnecessarily. The rest, as you know, is history. It's 2022, and COVID is alive and kicking among us. 35 months, 600 million cases, and 6 million deaths later, this scientist has issued a similar warning. He says the current COVID surge in China is thermonuclear bad yet again, and could soon spill over to the rest of the world. Sound familiar? Deja vu, perhaps. He has also given some numbers. He says 60% of China's population and 10% of the Earth's population could get infected in the next 90 days. What about deaths? The scientist says that they could likely run into millions. Now, I know what you must be thinking. These are just predictions by one scientist. But then again, this is not a standalone prediction. There are others with similar warnings, and they're worrying to say the least. Take this report, for instance. It's based on data from the University of Hong Kong. Professors there say the Wuhan virus could kill more than 1 million Chinese. 1 million. If the country fully reopens by January next year. Look at this report now. It was carried by the NPR. It says COVID is spreading faster than ever in China. More than 800 million people could be infected this winter. This is based on estimates by researchers at the Yale University. Take a look at this headline now. It was carried by Bloomberg. It says the COVID outbreak in China has worried scientists about new variants, about new virus mutations all over the world. In fact, the CDC, that is the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, says it's already on the lookout for new variants. Like I said, deja vu. And by the way, health officials are not alone in raising alarm. Even government officials are issuing warnings. Take this one, for instance. It's from Ned Price, the official spokesperson of the US State Department. He says the toll of COVID in China is a major concern for the rest of the world. He has also added that the COVID wave in China has the potential to mutate and pose a threat everywhere. Exact words spoken.
The toll of the virus is of concern to the rest of the world, given the size of China's GDP, given the size of China's economy. It's not only good for China to be in a stronger position vis-a-vis COVID, but it's good for the rest of the world as well. The United States continues to be a leading force for countries around the world in the provision of vaccines and helping countries overcome the acute phase of the virus. We certainly hope that will be the case before long in the PRC as well.
So what do we make of this? How do we perceive these warnings? To answer these questions, we'll have to take a look at what's unfolding in China, understand the scale of the crisis and its potential to spill over. I'll start with these images. They're from the Chinese hospital. It is overwhelmed with patients currently. Morgues are filled with dead bodies, and yet there's no official word from China on hospitalizations. It maintains that not more than 7 people have died in the last few weeks. How then does China plan to explain these images? They're from a crematorium in Beijing. There are funeral vehicles here. As far as the eye can see, there are relatives of victims dressed in black from head to toe, desperately waiting for their turn to arrive, and when asked about their plight, all of them refuse to speak. China also maintains that the caseload is falling, that there are very few fresh infections. Then what explains these images? They are from Beijing. These are delivery workers crowding outside pharmacies, waiting to collect medicines. They say they're picking up multiple orders because loads of people have tested positive. You must listen to this.
The reopening has been slightly burdensome. It's a bit of a burden to suddenly reopen when the supply of medications was not sufficiently prepared.
I am not worried. Anyway, the people around me, loads of them are positive, but I'm not positive yet. I've been taking vitamins.
Look at these images now. They're from Shanghai. They show the city's residents lining up outside fever clinics, trying to buy urgent medication. The queues stretch for several meters, with people waiting in line for several hours. These are just a few images that could make it beyond China's censors. Who knows how many more are stuck within the great Chinese firewall? That said, there's no dearth of official statements flowing in from Beijing. Chinese health officials are doing regular presses, downplaying concerns about the situation. No surprises there. And of course, the possibility of new variants.
It is relatively unlikely that it will increase both its contagiousness and lethality at the same time. Will a new strain of both greater transmission and lethality appear? This possibility is even smaller.
You think that's bad? Then wait till you hear this. China has changed the criteria of what's a COVID-19 death and what's not. It says deaths caused due to respiratory failure after contracting COVID will be recorded, but it won't record deaths caused due to heart attacks or underlying diseases after contracting COVID. You must watch this.
Deaths caused by pneumonia and respiratory failure after contracting COVID-19 would be classified as COVID-19 deaths. Deaths caused by other underlying diseases such as cardiovascular disease, resulting in death for infected people, will not get that classification.
You heard that. Only deaths due to respiratory problems will be counted in the death toll. Deaths due to other factors will not. Why are we not surprised? When China can downplay the virus, when it can stop reporting asymptomatic cases, it can definitely change the criteria of COVID-19 deaths. The country plans to humiliate its own people, even in death. Which brings us back to where we started. Can this wave cross China's borders? Can it infect the rest of the world? Yes. Through travel, airports and aeroplanes are becoming carriers. Let's take a look now at one of the world's busiest airports, which is experiencing an unprecedented meltdown as I speak, even as the country in which it is located is suffering from a great revival of COVID. I'm talking about the Heathrow Airport in Britain, the largest of 6 international airports in London and the second busiest airport in the world. It's in a state of mess. Or should I say absolute shambles? That's how the British media is describing the situation. What's all this about? A shortage, a crippling shortage of staff. It has plagued the airport for weeks now, with people waiting for their luggage for hours. Today, on the 20th of December, the situation took a turn for the worse. The airport looked absolutely nuts. The images on your screen tell the story. There were piles of luggage lying astray with no staff inside to deliver them. Now we know, December is the cruelest month for the global aviation sector. Almost every day is exceptionally hectic as people travel home for Christmas and New Year's. Is this the case with Heathrow too? Not really. The chaos you see at the airport is partly due to the ongoing strikes in the country. You see, essential services all over Britain have collapsed. I'm not exaggerating. Nurses, postal workers, rail unions, airport staff, the border force, all of them are on a striking spree. The aviation sector is the worst hit. Passengers entering Britain, even those leaving the country, are stuck at airports for hours. The situation could get worse as a number of flights pick up. Reports say the number of people visiting the UK this December could return to pre-pandemic levels. According to one estimate, the overall inbound visits by the end of this year could be 29.7 million. For 2023, the estimate is 35.1 million inbound visits. You may think this is good news. Well, if this is the number achieved, it could be a new record for the number of inbound visits to the country. I told you these numbers for a reason. It's now on your screens. The headline is from last week. It says, a COVID rebound is underway in the United Kingdom. Hospitalizations are rising 13%. This was last week. Look at this graph now. It tells you how hospitalizations have been on a constant rise this month. In fact, last Monday, more than 724 patients were admitted with the virus. This is the highest daily tally since October 27th. It doesn't end there. According to the UK's own data, the country has recorded over 57,000 cases in the last 1 week. 57,000. That's a big number. And it has spooked health experts. Some say the UK is definitely in a new wave. They've even identified potential hotspots. Somerset, Torbay, Plymouth, and Bristol, to name a few. They say the situation may be bleaker than back in 2020. It definitely poses a new threat for all of us. Another report says that doctors at the NHS have called the spike very concerning. They say the UK could be headed for a severe healthcare crisis. That's not all. Some experts are even suggesting the return of masks and testing. Once again, it's déjà vu. What does this tell you? That the United Kingdom could be, and I use that word with caution, it could be on track for another wave of the Wuhan virus. And if it gets in the grip of such a wave, it could become a nodal carrier of potential infections. We told you about the Heathrow Airport, how it's struggling this festive season, how passengers are waiting for hours in queues. The airport is overwhelmed with passengers from across the world. Is this the making of a new wave? Do they have reason to worry? Do we have reason to worry? I can't say for sure right now, but the numbers don't help. Over 80 million passengers go through Heathrow every year. More than 219,000 passengers go through this airport each day. And over 1,300 flights come and go from Heathrow per day. Just look at those numbers. How many of these flights come from China? How many of these passengers come from China? I know it's early to be asking these questions, but the situation in both these countries doesn't instill confidence. We know China is suffering. What about the UK? Well, as COVID cases rise, the country's health staff is on a protest. Look at these visuals now. These are nurses from the NHS protesting over low wages. Reports say more than 100,000 of them are protesting across the country. They're staging walkouts every other day. They say their movement will not end until the government meets their demands.
I've said time and time again, I won't dig in if they won't dig in, but they need to find a room and bring me into it. I'm looking for that room every single hour of the day. I will not be found wanting in getting into that room, and I will be available night or day to do that. He can bring this strike to a conclusion before the end of this week. He owes that to this profession. He owes it to every member of the public in the country, so let's do it right now.
Not undermining the movement, but the timing of it is indeed worrying. COVID cases are on the rise, inbound travel has picked up, and health workers are on strike. Do you get my point here? Could Britain be headed the China way? I want you to think about that. Could Britain too end up in the grip of a lethal wave? We shall find out in a matter of days, and we'll of course stay on top of this story. Let's move on now. The world's richest club of nations, the European Union, along with its allies, has for decades been the moral authority for the world. The bloc believes to have set the standards of democracy, of transparency, of accountability, of openness and values to look up to. Today, we're calling its bluff. For years, the West has consistently maintained that corruption is an Asian, Latin American and an African problem. Europe, for one, pretends to be a paradise without any vice. But the reality today is quite different. Europe and the United Kingdom have been hit by scandal after scandal. What a fall from grace. On the show, we've told you about how the European Parliament has lost all credibility. The Qatargate scandal continues to explode. New names are being added to the list of corrupt lawmakers. Millions of euros have been exchanged as bribes. Suitcases full of cash have been seized, and lawmakers have been accused of lobbying, graft, and of selling Europe's sovereignty to a wealthy country. The scandal has exposed Europe's hypocrisy, destroyed its ideals of transparency and accountability. Well, the UK may have exited the European Union, but has been battling the same issues in the last few years. We're talking about institutionalized corruption. In the latest, Joseph Edmund Johnson, or Joe Johnson, the brother of former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, has resigned from his position as an advisor to Befinity, a subsidiary firm of Binance, the crypto exchange. Reports say he decided to distance himself as demands for transparency from Binance grew. In a statement, the 50-year-old member of the House of Lords said, "I stepped down from the advisory board last week and have no role with it or any related entity." Some background now. The crypto giant is facing trouble gaining regulatory approval to launch operations in the UK. The company is already dealing with a possible indictment by the US Department of Justice. It considers filing criminal charges against Binance for violating anti-money laundering laws. Serious charges. The United Kingdom's House of Lords symbolizes so much that is wrong with the country. It has long been the only democracy in the world where membership of the national parliament is up for sale. A peerage is sold to party donors. There is an open embrace of corruption and a complete lack of accountability. Yet, no member of the political establishment will admit this. The country is also familiar with controversies related to its MPs and second jobs, moonlighting. Moonlighting MPs are earning more than ever from second jobs. The controversy began in 2021 after Conservative MP Owen Paterson was found to have breached the Ministerial Code of Conduct by misusing resources, engaging in paid lobbying and failing to disclose interests. The controversy forced him to submit his resignation to the then Tory leader Boris Johnson. Reports say 1 year on from the scandal, UK MPs are making more than ever from second jobs. Despite the government's promises to clamp down on the practice, an investigation found that between October last year and September this year, MPs made more than £5.3 million from outside work. It is common for former cabinet ministers to take on new roles as advisors and non-executives in companies, especially those run by major party donors. Interestingly, the highest earners from second jobs also included former Prime Minister Theresa May. Imagine that. From lobbying contracts for the NHS during the pandemic to posh titles and even places in Parliament, there's a price tag for everything. Whether the British leaders accept it or not, but over the years, they have institutionalized corruption, normalized it. Europe and its corruption saga doesn't end here for tonight. Have you heard of White Christmas? No. I'm not talking about picturesque snow-covered streets in the UK during the holiday season. Drug shipments are making their way into Europe. Custom authorities in Belgium have seized 10 tons of cocaine worth more than $795 million in Antwerp. The joint operation by authorities in Belgium and the Netherlands is called White Christmas. It was launched to capture record levels of cocaine. Just last week, officials made a large drug bust. It's right out of a Hollywood crime thriller. 3.9 tons of cocaine was hidden in a shipment of bananas from Ecuador. Last Wednesday, another 4.8 tons in a second load of bananas was found in a shipment from Panama. A third similar shipment being sent to the Netherlands via Antwerp was hiding a further 1.3 tons. The total cocaine seizures for this year are expected to surpass last year's figures of 90 tons. Now, all this is worth more than $6 billion. So how are such huge amounts of drugs making their way into Europe? Is it because of the laxity of authorities or the leaders? What happened to the West's anti-corruption policy? Can Europe be the flag bearer of an anti-corruption campaign any longer? Can it really lecture other Asian, African and Latin American nations on accountability, transparency and fighting corruption? I just say this, it's high time that Europe reviews its own policies before giving lectures to the rest of the world. Now let's talk about Elon Musk. Does Musk want to pass on the Twitter baton, or does he want to stay on as the chief twit? He recently put out a poll asking Twitter users if he should stay on as the Twitter founder CEO. And to his surprise, users overwhelmingly supported his resignation. Our next report gets you all the details.
Is Elon Musk resigning as Twitter chief or not? Well, that's a billion-dollar question. While Musk himself may be in two minds, Twitter users are certainly not. On Sunday, Elon Musk put out a poll asking participants to vote on whether or not he should step down as the head of Twitter, promising to abide by the results of this poll. The results were certainly something that Musk did not expect. 57.5% of participants, that's more than 10 million users, said it was time for him to go. Given Musk's frequency of tweeting and rapid decisions after previous polls, many would have expected a quick response on this one too. In the past, Musk has obeyed Twitter polls. He's fond of quoting the phrase Vox Populi, Vox Dei, a Latin phrase that roughly means the voice of the people is the voice of God. But this time, Musk chose not to address the elephant in the room. Will he listen to the voice of the people? He spent most of the next day conspicuously quiet. He finally broke his silence when he responded with one word: interesting. His one-word response was to multiple suggestions that the results of the poll were skewed by fake accounts. And then came another tweet where he said only paid Twitter Blue subscribers will be able to vote in future policy-related polls. In the meantime, jokes and memes poking fun at Musk's poll also flooded the platform. One Twitter account even drew a funny analogy between former UK PM Liz Truss's lettuce jokes and Musk's Twitter stint. Since buying Twitter for $44 billion and taking over as the CEO, Musk has journeyed from one controversy to the next. He has portrayed himself as a boss who would transform Twitter. Instead, the social media company has been free-falling into chaos since his takeover. Let's not forget suspending journalists who report on him, his controversial policy of banning linking out to rival platforms, laying off staff, firing those who disagreed with him, and welcoming those who were earlier banned for hate speech and misinformation. These have been some of Musk's recent decisions. He calls himself a free speech absolutist, but in practice he's found that the right to speech conflicts with other rights. The first one is safety. In November, mentioning his unwavering commitment to free speech, he said he would not ban a Twitter account that tweeted the whereabouts of his private jet. But last week, he changed his mind after a stalker bothered his son. Not only was the jet account suspended, Twitter brought in rules outlawing the reporting of others' real-time locations. Musk even limited speech when it was bad for profits. After some pranksters targeted brands like Pepsi and Nestle, Twitter outlawed them to stop advertisers from fleeing. But brand safety was not the only concern for advertisers. Twitter has been losing them over concerns about content moderation and hate speech too. The platform is also on track to lose more money than the $221 million it lost in 2021. Twitter has certainly been a costly adventure for Musk. And all this certainly holds several lessons for whoever follows Elon Musk as Twitter head, should he leave. Because before results of the poll came in, Musk tweeted, "As the saying goes, be careful what you wish." So, is Elon Musk planning to sign off as chief twit? We'll have to wait and see how the saga unfolds.
The spiritual leader of Tibet, the Dalai Lama, has made a statement. He has said that he prefers living in India and there is no point in returning to China. His statement comes days after tensions escalated in Tawang after China provoked India yet again. Let me give you a little background. The Dalai Lama fled to India on March 19th in 1955 disguised as a soldier. The 23-year-old monk escaped from his palace in Lhasa, and the reason behind this was China. Tibet had been suffering under China's anti-religious legislation, which considered Tibet as its own territory. The People's Liberation Army was after the Dalai Lama, and when he fled, a brutal crackdown began. Since then, China has time and again tried to meddle in Tibetan affairs, especially the religious ones. Let me explain how. Tibetan Buddhists of the Gelug tradition believe that the Dalai Lama can reincarnate, that he has control over his rebirth and can even choose the body in which he will be reincarnated. The previous Dalai Lama died in 1933, but instead of exiting the circle of life and death, he is believed to have been reborn as Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama, who has now become a global icon. When Tenzin Gyatso dies, Tibetan Buddhists believe that he will reincarnate as a child somewhere on earth, but China wants to meddle and dictate. The atheist regime says it will appoint its own Dalai Lama. In 2011, the Chinese Foreign Ministry declared that only the Beijing government can declare the next Dalai Lama and that no other succession candidate should be given any identification. Just look at the irony here. A country that doesn't even believe in religion wants to play a role in the afterlife and reincarnation of a religious figure. That's not all. China took a key spiritual figure into its custody. This time, it was a 6-year-old boy. I'm talking about the Pancham Lama, who is responsible for finding the reincarnated Dalai Lama. That's the belief. He's the second most important figure in Tibetan Buddhism and is appointed by the Dalai Lama himself. The current Dalai Lama chose a 6-year-old boy as the Pancham Lama in May of 1995, but China rejected the appointment, and a few days later, the Pancham Lama disappeared. 27 years on, China says the boy is leading a normal life as a Chinese citizen and that he and his family don't wish to be disturbed. His whereabouts have not been disclosed. Now, China wishes to do the same with the Dalai Lama. They want to appoint a duplicate who is favorable to the regime, the Chinese regime. But the Dalai Lama has said that he will not let that happen. He says he is the final authority and that Chinese communists, out of everyone, will not get a say in this. In the history of Tibetan Buddhism, there have been a total of 14 Dalai Lamas. They started off as spiritual leaders in the 15th century. By the 17th century, they became political leaders. All of them are believed to have reincarnated and discovered with the help of the Pancham Lama. Now, whatever you believe is your choice, but tonight my question is this. Does China really have the authority to meddle with this age-old tradition? Be it geopolitics or religion, the communist regime has always tried to impose its principles and take what doesn't rightfully belong to it, usurp it. On the other hand, there's India, a country which has protected Tibetan Buddhists, a country the Dalai Lama calls home. So it does make sense for him to believe that he will be reincarnated here, and I'm not the one who is saying this. This is what many Tibetan Buddhists believe. The Indian Himalayan Council of Nalanda Buddhist tradition is holding a meeting in Delhi. And our principal correspondent, Siddhant Sibil, spoke to some of the Tibetan monks for their take on the story. Listen in.
In the first governing council meeting, there was a discussion, but the organization had not come up with a resolution on the issue of reincarnation. So our resolution, as far as this organization is concerned, on the reincarnation of His Holiness is that, the issue of reincarnation of His Holiness Dalai Lama is purely a religious and cultural issue. And then, no other authority has any authority to, interfere with the system of reincarnation, even if it is done on a political ground that has no recognition as far as the importance of the institution is concerned. So it is purely a religion and cultural process. We should not be having interference from any corner. Even if there is interference, that will not be accepted.
The Dalai Lama has said that he will live to the age of 113 and hinted that his successor would be a woman. Or perhaps succession planning isn't at the top of the agenda as of now. But when it will be, what will be China's reaction? Will it impose its own ideology on the Tibetan culture? Will it perhaps choose a Dalai Lama of its own? Only time will tell. The clock is ticking, time is slipping by, global leaders have set ambitious climate goals. Promises are being made, pledges are being taken, but of what use have they been? Greenhouse gas emissions are still on the rise, crippling heat waves have become the norm. Global temperatures in 2023 are set to be among the hottest on record. And now the Earth's sixth mass extinction has officially begun. Where are we headed? Let's talk about the COP27 summit. Global leaders met back in November in Egypt to discuss climate goals. And on the top of the agenda was limiting global warming. Leaders worldwide have set a goal to reduce carbon emissions and limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius till 2030. Well, there's no denying that this goal is well intended, but here comes the reality check. The UK Met Department says the global average temperatures will be about 1.2 degrees Celsius higher than before, even before climate change began as an issue. So if that is correct, it would be the 10th such year in a row that's correct for the last decade. Global temperatures have shown a rise of at least 1 degree Celsius compared to pre-industrial times. Studies say, seeing the current pace of emissions, we are now headed towards a global temperature rise of above 2 degrees Celsius. And this could be towards the end of the century. This can even reach 3 degrees Celsius. Why am I telling you all this? Because global leaders are striving to limit the rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. But we will hit the 1.3 mark next year itself. So decide for yourself tonight. Is this climate goal really feasible? Do we really have the time and the technology to achieve it? And if not, what is the point of these conferences? And what is the point of setting unachievable goals? Why not aim for something more realistic, something more attainable, which would work not only in a room full of diplomats, but on the ground level as well? The teenage activist Greta Thunberg has refused to attend such summits. She dismissed the forum as greenwashing. Was she right to do so? Do leaders see these conferences as just another opportunity to toot their own trumpet? 12 years ago, rich nations made a significant pledge at the UN Climate Summit in Copenhagen. They promised $100 billion annually to lesser wealthy nations by 2020. The goal of this fund was to help them adapt to climate change and mitigate further rises in temperature. But the promise was broken. Developed countries say they are on track to fulfill the pledge by 2023, next year. But analysis of the available data suggests that their numbers may be inflated. In fact, a report by India's Ministry of Finance was one of the first to scrutinize these claims. It says that the developed countries, richer countries, claim to have provided nearly $62 billion in 2014. But here's the reality, only $2.2 billion were actually disbursed. This came after deducting inflated numbers and funds which were not provided as grants. Reports show that a majority of public climate finance provided by developed countries are actually loans. Grants do not account for even half of those funds. In 2020, developed countries provided more than $68 billion in public finance, As much as $48.6 billion were actually in the form of loans, not grants. Meanwhile, only $17.6 billion were given as grants. So I ask, why such misleading promises? Just to give a false sense of climate action? What is it, if not greenwashing? Meanwhile, another conference just ended in Montreal. As the leaders discuss species extinction at the UN Biodiversity Summit, a new study has made shocking revelations. It predicts that more than 17% of species will be extinct by the end of this century. And the biggest cause of this mass extinction would be climate change. Now my question is, if the planet is facing such serious repercussions, what are global leaders waiting for? Why are they wasting their time on making promises they don't intend to keep and setting goals that are not realistic? This is the time to act. The UN chief, Antonio Guterres, rightly said, "We are on a highway to climate hell, and our foot is still on the accelerator." Right, moving on to some good news now. A world-first surgery in the United Kingdom is making headlines globally. A surgery using stem cells from a placenta bank. Here's why it could be a breakthrough. The operation was conducted on a baby who was born with a congenital heart defect. Why does this matter? Because it's a story of hope for children across the world who are born with a congenital heart disease. In our next report, we break down stem cell research for you and tell you why it could save lives in the future. Take a look.
Baby Finley was all of 4 years old when he had his first heart surgery. He had been diagnosed with a rare heart defect, which meant that the two main blood vessels leaving his heart were in the wrong order. The left side of the baby's heart was missing coronary arteries. These are responsible for supplying blood, oxygen, and nutrients to the heart. As you may imagine, the family was heartbroken. You see, the risks of heart surgery for such a small child are well documented, and yet a 12-hour surgery was conducted on baby Finley. But his heart condition continued to deteriorate. If you go by reports, it was a unique stem cell method which saved his life. His surgeon injected millions of allogenic cells directly into baby Finley's heart, hoping that the blood vessels would grow. An allogenic stem cell transplant uses healthy blood stem cells from a donor. Millions of these cells were grown by scientists at the Royal Free Hospital in London. What makes this a world first is that the heart surgeon used stem cells from a placenta bank to repair the heart defect. This is quite a milestone. In the last few years, a lot of resources have been poured into stem cell research across the world. We've seen reports of its use among cancer patients. Reports say stem cell technology could save the UK's National Health Service, or NHS, an estimated £30,000 for every surgery no longer needed. That alone can save millions of pounds every year. So what does stem cell research entail? It studies the properties of stem cells and their potential use in medicine. Stem cells are the source of all tissues in the body, so if you understand their properties, it can help you understand the human body as a whole. Stem cell therapy is gaining traction in organ transplants, since it uses cells instead of donor organs. The latter is limited in supply. These stem cells are grown in a lab and can be manipulated to specialize into specific types of cells, be it heart muscle cells, blood cells, or nerve cells, and these are then implanted into a patient. So, if a patient has a heart condition, specific cells can be injected into the heart muscle. And yes, it could save lives, which explains why the global stem cell therapy market is projected to reach $928.6 million by 2031. When it comes to advanced research in stem cell technology, the US leads the pack, followed by China, Italy, Germany, the UK, Japan, France, India, and Canada. But there are high costs to keep in mind. In 2022, the cost of stem cell therapy ranges from less than $5,000 for simple procedures to a whopping $25,000 for more complex ones. In the case of baby Finley, the procedures like these offers hope to other children who are suffering from congenital birth defects. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, congenital heart defects are the most common type of birth defects. Families caring for a child battling such an illness may get a sense of relief, knowing their child doesn't need repeat surgeries. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Before I end the show, I want to talk about a very popular green leafy vegetable. It's considered the holy grail of good nutrition. When Popeye the Sailor Man ate tins of spinach to motivate kids to consume the vegetable for good health, strength and a ripped body, little did we think that spinach would ever be a cause for panic or fear. Why do I say this? Because more than 100 people in Australia's New South Wales have reported hallucinations, delirium and other mild-altering reactions after eating spinach. Spinach, which appears to have been contaminated by a mysterious plant. Reports say those who ate the contaminated spinach described feeling dizzy. They said they were unable to stand, had blurred vision and struggled to breathe. Authorities tested the weed believed to be responsible for the widespread recall of products containing spinach. They were thought to have come from a farm in Victoria. People are also being urged to check and dump any recalled products. You see, these days raw vegetables and green leafy vegetables have made it to mainstream diets. Just look at Instagram. The green goddess salad, a kale smoothie or the usual Caesar salad, they're all trending everywhere. Some experts recommend eating raw leafy green vegetables. They say they are packed with minerals, fiber and vitamins, offering countless health benefits, reducing the risk of obesity, strengthening your immune system. Some experts say they can prevent heart diseases. I'm not debating any of that. I want to show you both sides of the story. Many are a little skeptical. They choose to go by traditional wisdom of washing and cooking the vegetables properly and avoiding eating them raw. If you're watching me from India right now, you know what I'm talking about. Our grandparents scolded us every time we reached out for a raw leafy green. Many feared that eating raw vegetables may invite the deadly tapeworm infection in the brain. The same tapeworms which travel through food into your body can cause a parasitic infection in the brain. The reason? Poor sanitation and improper cultivation of vegetables and crops, with sewage water which contains human feces infected by a tapeworm. So let me be clear, it's not the cabbage or any other leafy vegetable that invites the deadly brain tapeworm. Infections with tapeworms are common but treatable. So how can you prevent a tapeworm infection? Here are some easy rules to follow. Wash your hands before eating or handling food. Wash the vegetables and fruit well before eating. Follow proper sanitation practices. Use water safety practices while traveling. Avoid eating undercooked or raw food whenever you can. What I am trying to tell you here is that whether you prefer a cooked meal or a raw one, whether you want to choose a popular leafy diet or go the traditional way, it is completely up to you. But what you must not compromise on is hygiene. And on that note, let's take a look at what else is making news around the world. Time now for Gravitas Global Headlines.
Just no end to former U.S. President Donald Trump's troubles. Amid heat on the Capitol Hill riots,
President Trump intended to disrupt the peaceful transition of power.
Trump's wealth and tax returns to be taken up in the House. Pakistani security forces killed all terrorists who had taken over a counter-terrorism center 3 days after they had held security officers and detainees hostages at the northwestern facility. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak vows to match or exceed a $2.8 billion military aid to Ukraine, but reports speak of spending concerns as Sunak orders audit of Ukraine war spend. Meanwhile, the House of Lords report raises concerns on big risks to the UK economy amid high workforce exodus and inactivity during the pandemic. Employment in UK to reach pre-COVID levels. After a visit to close ally Belarus, President Putin says that the situation in 4 territories of Ukraine that Russia annexed but does not entirely control militarily is extremely difficult. Cryptocurrency exchange FTX boss Sam Bankman-Fried agrees to be extradited to the US to face charges. He's been accused of engineering the biggest financial fraud in US history. The World Bank cuts China growth forecasts for the year to 2.7% from 4.3% it predicted in June. This after the pandemic and weaknesses in property sector hit the country's economy. Amber Heard agrees to pay $1 million to ex-husband Johnny Depp in defamation settlement. Says she is dropping an appeal as she simply cannot go through after another trial. Newly crowned world champions Argentina landed in capital Buenos Aires in the early hours of morning. Messi and co were treated to a hero's welcome by thousands of fans who started gathering near the Ezeiza International Airport a day earlier. The unofficial anthem of the team, Muchachos, echoed through the streets as the team danced their way in an open-top bus. England have become the first team to complete a Test Series sweep in Pakistan. The 3 Lions cruised to an 8-wicket win in the 3rd Test in Karachi. The visitors gunned down the target of 167 in just 28.1 overs.
And with that, it's a wrap on the show. Thanks for watching with me, Priyanka Sharma, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. I'll see you tomorrow.
Atención, los futbolistas se acercarán a saludar a los hinchas. Se detiene el micro.
Bonjour grand. Oui, t'as faim, je sais. Attends. On peut changer un peu les habitudes là, s'il te plaît?
Voilà.
बचपन जिंदगी में सिर्फ एक बार आता है, उसे खुल के जीने दो, दाग लगने दो। दीवारों पर लगाए ना बर्जर इजी क्लीन पेंट, नो दाग नो धब्बा, ओनली ब्यूटीफुल वॉल्स। जो मैला ना हो रंगों में, वो क्या बचपन है। जो झूमे ना उमंगों में, वो क्या बचपन है। बचपन जिंदगी में सिर्फ एक बार आता है, उसे खुल के जीने दो, दाग लगने दो। दीवारों पर लगाए ना बर्जर इजी क्लीन पेंट, इसके क्रॉस लिंकिंग पॉलीमर से नो दाग नो धब्बा, ओनली ब्यूटीफुल वॉल्स।
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at WION.com.
It's code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. Wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker, weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT.